Hi, I'm Elisha Lutz. I'm the Vice President of Client Services at Ideas Collide. I also oversee our Portland office.
Hi, I'm Bryan Noguchi. I oversee the paid media practice for Ideas Collide, also based in the Portland office, and I also have some responsibilities with regard to content strategy and audience development. I was a fly fishing guide in Northern California and had been doing that. I worked for a rod company. I worked for Fly Shop, ran all their classes and casting instruction, and then their guiding service as well. And it just got to the point where it was mostly people like my parents are just like, hey, you went to college and you have this degree and you're a trout bum. And I was like, yes, that's true. And a good friend of mine was working at J. Walter Thompson in San Francisco. And she said to me, you would be really good in media because and mostly it was an insult. She was just like, because you're kind of retentive and you're a little bit of a stickler on things like details and that's what media is. And I was like, oh well, let me talk to somebody in media, which I did, and it was like, I totally want to do this. I like the numbers. I liked the idea that ultimately you become really a specialist at a fairly niche sort of set of knowledge that centers on audience. And you have incredible tools at your disposal. And so this idea of becoming this expert on audience and how they consume information was super appealing to me. And I literally never looked back.
So they hired you?
Yeah, so it was really, it was kind of a different era, right? So like, I literally, that was the era when you kind of looked at a resume and said, this person majored in advertising, like who does that, right? So they liked the idea of me trying to sort of transfer that hunger for expertise. I think that's what worked in the end, because I'm a fairly accomplished fly fisher. I mean, I wasn't amazing, but
but they could see that passion and that you really like poured yourself into something and really wanted to master it.
Yeah.
And so they saw potential.
They did, and it's really similar. Fly fishing and media are similar, right? You really have to have a pretty intimate understanding of your quarry, right? And in fly fishing, it's fish, obviously. You have to understand what they eat, where they live. In media, it's people. You have to understand how they consume information, the context around that consumption, what they like, what they don't like. You have to know those things. So
that's a really interesting comparison that I had never thought about before. It's almost like Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance, like that. You're as a fly fishing, you're targeting the fish and using all the tools in your toolkit to target the fish where they are, find them where they are. Yeah, and that's media.
It's exactly media.
Wow.
So how did you get into this business?
Also by accident. I studied anthropology in college. I have a degree in cultural anthropology. And it was something a subject always really fascinated with. And this was a different time too, where you're going to pick a degree and not worry so much about how applicable it could be or where the jobs were. Right. I was encouraged to pursue this topic and this subject that I loved. But in college, it became pretty apparent that most jobs in anthropology are in academia.
Huh.
They are, there are now, I think, more opportunities in agencies and, bigger agencies that have anthropologists on staff.
Yeah, for sure.
That was just maybe, a trend that was just sort of starting out at that time and not something I really connected at all. So it did occur to me, probably not going to do this as a job specifically, but I can use these skills and they apply to, basically anything that I'm going to do. And what I really was fascinated with anthropology is really study of culture, study of how individuals see themselves in that culture and how they see themselves and orient themselves with the world, and also how decisions are made and how you can influence people to make decisions. Yep. And so, that has always been very interesting. And so I got a job by chance as a marketing assistant at a sales organization and started helping with sales materials. and with very little direction, kind of figured out what does our audience really want and need, and what kind of messaging, what kind of incentive, like what kinds of things can we do to really pull them in. And I really fell in love with it.
Nice.
And so this was at a sales organization. And then I started to dabble a little bit actually in graphic design.
Oh, wow.
And I entered really the marketing field in a real way as a graphic designer.
Wow. Oh, I had no idea.
And I was very mediocre designer. Very mediocre. I was more of a typesetter, love typesetting, and very much like fonts and layout essentially. But I started to work on some pretty complex projects, and I found myself really excelling at the project management aspect of that, and organizing information, and working with different internal stakeholders who are almost like clients, and just really pulling that process together, making it efficient and streamlining it. And people started to notice that, like, wow, this project we've done every year for 5 years, you just made it so much easier, and we just shaved time off, and nobody's angry, we haven't had errors, like, you're doing a really good job just managing this project. And so then I thought, well, maybe I want to grow my skill set in project management, so I kind of switched over to that.
Wow.
And then project management led to account management, led to managing people and bigger accounts, and now I'm have all of that, and now managing a location, a facility, which is very cool. So I always think it's really interesting how people arrive, how they get to where they are.
Yeah. The path is more direct, I think, for younger people now. Back when I started, because I'm sure I'm older than you, but there were a lot of interesting people. And you talk about anthropology, like all the great account planners had anthropology backgrounds. And were really good. And they were good at interviewing people, right? That's a skill that I'm sure you had to learn. So
I'm really digging in and trying to understand what they're thinking, what motivates them, how they see themselves, how they see other people. I still find all that very interesting. And even now, thinking back, while I didn't know I wanted to go into this industry, I remember as a kid always being very fascinated with advertising. Paying attention to advertising, paying attention to commercials, to billboards, like all that stuff in a way that was maybe a little bit deeper than just, what my friends were doing. And I actually had somebody point that out to me, who I got reacquainted with as an adult. And I said, at this time I was working in an advertising agency. You're like, that makes perfect sense. You always loved advertising. You remember you used to sing that commercial all the time? Like, no, I didn't really connect that, but it was something I had some interest in very early on.
Nice.
Yeah. I think something that is maybe a new aspect of your role, which you mentioned, and maybe new expansion of our capabilities, like content strategy, and that content planning. I think that's really interesting.
It's vitally important for all the reasons that it's always been important, right? That if everything starts with audience, and it does, how are we connecting with them? What is the context that connection is happening within? And how do we ensure consistency and sort of cohesiveness around all of those touch points a person can have over the course of the day? Their information consumption day extends across all sorts of channels that I can't buy. How are we connecting the dots between those paid touch points and those organic touch points? And so, historically agencies have talked about, this idea of paid, earned, owned, in terms of a company or a product's ability to connect with their audiences. And a lot of times the communication within those across those things are highly siloed. Trying to deliver a consistent brand identity across those different moments of interaction is what the team is responsible for now. And it means that we have to bring in a lot of different disciplines in order to achieve that and collaborate in ways that maybe we weren't used to collaborating before. So that's the real challenge, right? Is getting us to a place where we can talk to each other in development of these touch points in a way that creates these outputs that's super consistent, super intuitive, and seamless to the people we're trying to reach.
Right. And it's interesting that it's like same but different. So when you say consistent message, surely the core of that message needs to be consistent always across every touch point. The difference is, though, in how that is delivered and packaged is different per channel.
Yeah, and it's context, right?
Yeah.
And context has gotten lost in the past, past decade or more, right? Because we've been heavily reliant on algorithms to point the way in terms of we can talk for a long time about what constitutes efficacy, but context is one of those elements that's sort of fallen by the wayside. And I think it's important, and I think it doesn't context doesn't manifest itself particularly well in direct response mechanisms, but it does make a difference in the softer metrics, brand perception, brand favorability, things of that nature, and that's what we're trying to get ourselves back to. I'm on pets.com. I'm looking at dog doors. And for the rest of the day, or maybe even the rest of the month, I'm getting followed around my internet day by dog doors from Petco. I might have even bought that dog door, right, in that session, but it's still following me around because the technology isn't connecting that dot, isn't saying, oh, he already bought the dog door,
right,
or oh, he's on the wallstreetjournal.com. He doesn't care about the dog door anymore, and I'm bothering him, right? And so, and it does weird things to how I think of the brand. If I wasn't in advertising and I didn't know that was whatever that was back in the day, Blue Kai, clumsily just sort of tracking me because it could, I'd probably be upset.
At Petco.
Yeah,
Leave
at
me
Petco.
alone, Petco.
And it still happens, right? And it's because the algorithms alone aren't smart enough to discern when I'm actually wanting to have that message in front of me. And I think they're getting there. At the same time, we're taking some steps back because of privacy issues. So we don't want to creepily target people anymore, because that's not cool. But we want to be, again, sensitive to sort of the context in which they're exposed to us and interacting with us. So, it requires a human nuance, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the important element here. It does require human context in order to really understand some of those nuances that AI may not be able to pick up on.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, AI is smarter than all of us,
right?
And we will serve them, but that's not today. So
right.
Yeah, Elisha, what do you do outside of work?
So I think really my primary kind of outside of work focus right now is my two young kids. I have two boys, both under 10, which keeps me busy. I do find time to still appreciate even aspects that have to do with our role in our industry. So I'm very much into art and design and architecture, visual. I'm a visual person, love color and texture. And so I'm always aware of those things and trying to appreciate, that as much as I can, engage in art shows and museums and whatnot, and just in that kind of content. I love where we live. I love living here in Portland. So we're so enjoying the outdoors. We live in a place where we have hiking trails at the end of our street. So we're spending a lot of time outside, getting up to the snow when we can, getting out to the coast when we can. So just really enjoying what the Pacific Northwest has to offer, which is a lot.
Yeah.
So I can't really talk about that enough. I'm just really, really loving our location here.
Yeah. That was the same for us.
Yeah.
In the Bay Area, you can say you have access to the mountain, to Tahoe and to the beach, but people say Tahoe's 3 hours. It's like 5 or 7.
When you go on the
yeah,
weekends.
yeah, right. When everybody else is going. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's really true. Hood is right there.
Yeah.
And it's not even 2 hours. It's not
No.
even close to 2 hours. So, and we like to take advantage of that here as well. And of course, I still fish. So, so we have the Deschutes and the Metolius, and a lot of really classic trout water, as well as steelhead fishing here, which is not what it used to be, but it's still cool.
So you're still doing that? Like,
Yeah, I still fish. I don't fish that much. I mean, I went from a high of probably 230, 250 days a year on the water. Now I'm lucky to get 12. But that's not so bad.
Is fly fishing something that, is it a like skill that you have that you retain, and no matter how long the gaps are, do you just hop right back into it?
More or less. Yeah. It's hard because when you get that many days on a river, you might know the fish, right? I know that there's a fish that lives by that rock.
Wow.
And he likes to eat at 2:00 on overcast days, and this is what he's going to be eating. You can get to that point, and I don't have that intimacy with any river here now, but the base knowledge is still there, right? So the odds are still good, but it's not like clockwork like when I was doing it for a living.
Right.
So
how cool. You can know like where a fish lives, hangs out, and what he likes to eat.
Yeah, that's the crazy part, is just knowing is there'll be days I'll be sitting in the office and it'll get a little bit overcast, and you can sort of feel the barometer fall a little bit, and it's just like, oh man, this is
it.
I should be on the Deschutes like right now, but I'm not, and that's okay. This is awesome, but it's like, oh.
Well, Bryan, this is really fun. We see each other at work all the time. Sometimes, on the lean days here, it's just me and you.
Yeah.
But we don't often get to talk about this kind of stuff. So it's really cool.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it too.